long time ago in a land far, far away from here. It was a beautiful, still summer morning, not a Sunday, Thursday I think it was. And I was sitting on a hill at a United Church camp in Nova Scotia. There's that hill, right there. So just to the left of the lodge there, and up towards the white building. Sitting on the hill during what they called morning watch. Now, those of you who've been to camp, some of you know what morning watch is. You gather around the flag and raise the flag for the morning, sing the national anthem, and then we would just be dispersed with a thought. The leader would send us off with something to think about for 5 minutes or so, and we'd sit in silence. Very impressive to see a camp full of children, 80 or so kids, sitting quietly for 5 minutes, littered across this beautiful grassy green hill on Long Lake in Nova Scotia. And I wish you could see the rock that's out in the middle of that lake. Some strong swimmers could swim to it. There's a rock that's just called the Rock. We didn't have a name for it, but it was one of those big monolithic ancient rocks that stuck up out of the lake. And there was holes in it. If you dove down, they said, where you saw that people had tried to blow it up, but couldn't. It was that kind of rock. So the rock was the thing that you could look at. Other than the beautiful still lake, you could see the rock. So I was sitting there as a young counselor in morning watch, and we were all still and silent. And I was staring out at the rock. 16 years of age. I think I was 15. On that hill at Camp Kidston. And it was there, in that moment, on that morning, that I first felt really, really close. And that maybe something was up between God and me. I'm not saying that I thought about the ministry right there and then, but for some reason, the three most important things in my life, people, music, and nature, dawned on me that they were God working in my life. That's it. That was the thought. I love these three things, and that must be God working in my life. Seems quite simple now that I think about it, but it was quite powerful at the time. Right there, on that little green hill, outside of Middle Musquodoboit, Nova Scotia, right near Moose River Mines, God started to work. Well, let's just say I started to pay attention to God's work in my life. The Moses text reminds us that God reveals God's self in the most unexpected places, in unexpected ways, in the midst of slavery in Egypt to a lowly shepherd. He wasn't Moses. It wasn't Charlton Heston yet, right? We think of Moses or anything. No, he was skinny little Moses, the shepherd, out tending to his father-in-law's flocks. He was Moses who had been prince of Egypt, but had given it all up, and was now just a lowly little Jewish shepherd. God calls in the most unexpected places, in unexpected ways. And God calls I just have to mention, Moses tried 5 times to get out of it. Right? 5 times. Again, that doesn't fit right with our sense of Moses, whose very name in Egyptian means sent. Moses hadn't clued in yet that his name meant sent. At this point, he was at wander. Just wander. Or follow sheep. Or herd. He'd been sent, but he didn't know it. And he tried 5 times. I can't speak right. Who am I? How will they know? He just every good excuse he could think of. This is Moses, the one with excuses of why not to do what God wants him to do. God gets a little more mustard together, musters the word, and says, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, your forefathers. I am that God. God calls to Moses in a relational way, mentioning the great ancestors. You want to know who I am? I'm this God. I'm not just a flash in a bush. I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Moses had heard about that God. Moses was just starting to learn about that God. Yeah, Abraham, Isaac, I've heard those stories. Oh, you're that God. God couches the call to Moses in relationship. But here's the funny thing. Many of us have come to faith on the backs of the faith of others, or on the laps of faith, one professor of mine would say. We're from our mother's lap. So we fall on our knees when we hear a certain prayer. We know the words of the Lord's Prayer by routine because someone taught us. Many of us, this very moment, come to church because somebody else taught us to come to church. But too often we've left it there with our ancestors. We've left our faith life in theirs, even if they've gone on before us. But God calls using the words of the ancestors, but God calls Moses also right then. We are tempted in our Christian, in our sense of call, well, God called my grandmother, maybe. Oh, the faithful person. My friend Darrell in Seattle says, not one church building, not one ever built, unless it was on the back of a woman. So easy to leave it with those, well, they have faith for us. We don't really need to figure it out. They're the faithful one. But because this is a story of someone being called after the ancestors, that God calls in relationship, but God doesn't just ask. God calls now. And in fact, when Moses says, okay, who am I going to say sent me? If mine, who is it who's sending me? And this is the faithful time. So the pinnacle, a moment where God turns the relationship. You know names are important. You know to be named is to offer power to the other who carries that name. And God says, I am who I am. It's pretty mysterious. And that's just one translation. Because in fact, God, that word, Yahweh, can be translated, I am who I will be. I am that I'm going to be. It's very confusing. There's not one Hebrew Hebrew scholar who's figured out and been able to say, this is exactly what that name means. But there is some movement in it. There is some ongoing verbology in it, we could say. That isn't just, I am who I am right now, Moses. But there's something about more. I am the God of promises. I am the God of hopes. I am the God of dreams. You can see me spinning my hand. Because in the word Yahweh, there is movement and promise and hope and desire and dreaming. Who am I? I am who I am. I am who I will be. Just watch me. Yahweh. Don't leave it with the ancestors, God says. Don't leave it in the past. Yeah, I am the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, but I am the God of more. And could you just go to those Israelites and tell them, "It is over. I have more for them." Because we know the story of Moses and the burning bush, we've heard other powerful call stories. We often think that a call from God a certain way. How often have you been asked, have you been called by God? I know your workmates have asked you that. Hey, have you been called by God? Anybody ask you on the street? How about a family member? When you've been put to you by preachers, have you been called by God? There's an image that comes to your heart or your mind. I wonder what that is. Just take a second. Somebody says, have you been called by God? What does it look like in your heart or your mind? I sat with a very teacher once, He was about to get married here. He was a counselor,
Person who inspires men,
guardian,
a companion for people, many degrees under his belt, and he described once a dream that he had. Dream Reverend Dave of this whirlwind. This whirlwind was furious in front of me, but as I got closer, I felt more and more peaceful, calmer, and though it seemed visually so violent. He said, then I woke and I just felt like that was God. I had a dream about God in that peacefulness. He stopped and looked at me and said, do you think that was God? I said, if you felt like it was God, has it caused you great peace inside? Yeah. Has it guidance? Yeah. Has it given you strength to help others? Yeah. Well, that sounds like God to me, I said. That's the problem. We always think it looks like something else. The burning bush. It's got to be a burning bush. How many years I wished my call from God had been a moment. I knew some people in theological college. They brought their stories out the first few weeks when we get to know you. Nothing like a get to know you game that's what your call to God from God looked like. You know? I remember somebody had one about a cocoon and a butterfly, same dream for weeks, and they realized that was their call. Ooh, I wish I had a butterfly dream, I thought to myself. Others had been loved and cared for by the community, and then in that they heard their call. Oh, I wish I'd had that kind of tragedy to come out of. No, none of that. I had the grade A bumpy road, not sure what I'm doing in life kind of call. They always say minister when you can't do anything else. Absolutely, tell you that. I was going to be a music teacher. Some of you don't know that. Did 2 years of music education degree. I was going to be a music teacher. All through those 2 years, I had this other thing happening, this sort of crankiness, this uncertainty, this upset. It made me really bad at theory and harmony. It's God's fault. I just couldn't get it. Something kept me unsettled in my music work. And by the end of my second year, I realized it was I had been ignoring I had been ignoring my call. Oh, I used to hear it in my earphones on my Sony Walkman that I paid $199. It was the most beautiful sport. It was sport water resistant. And I used to go for walks on the side of Acadia University. Morrison, Poetic Champions, composed an album of my calling. And I'd hear Van sing, if my heart could do the thinking and my head began to feel. And I thought, oh God, okay, I'm ready. And then I'd go back to school and keep trying to be a music teacher. It's not simple, easy, or straightforward, and rarely, that's the title of my sermon, rarely is it a burning bush. So stop waiting. We are all called by God. And every time I say it, and I've said it 100 times probably over the 15 years I've been here, you're called by God, I know you go home and say, well, somebody else probably. Because you're like Moses. You got reason after reason why it's not you, why it didn't look the right way. If you bring it to me this way, then for sure that would be like creature wishes. And I have wished 100 times that I could explain or point out or control the moment of when your call will come to you, when your call will be revealed, or as I said a few minutes ago, when you actually realize what your call looks like. It's Mother Teresa. It's not necessarily save the world in these big steps. It's not like Moses, could you go save these people from slavery? Calls are small. Whispers sometimes. Nudging. They might be a little piece of something that you're supposed to do. But I'll tell you, they're always wonderful. I wondered, how could I incubate your imagination? How could I instill in you a sense of what your call might look like, or better yet, how you might listen better? I can't tell you what it's going to look like. I have no idea. But even now, as I speak about call, if you heard something in your heart, write it down or tell somebody else. Bring it to life. I remember speaking to Andrew Sterling. He was the minister in my church when I was a teenager. He was a young, cool dude, drove a Volvo. First minister I ever knew drove a Volvo. And he lived in South Africa and he'd been part of the apartheid movement, and they put him in solitary confinement. This is the kind of minister every teenager wants, right? He was a cool justice seeker. Played with Christa Berg in South Africa in concert. Back when Christa Berg was cool. And I remember going up to his office once at an event, and I said to him, I asked him a little more about his life, and blah, 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 blah. And as I turned out of the office, I turned to...
And just another thing, how is it you know? The great question. How do you know you're called in the ministry? Like, how did you know? And sounds like you already are. He put a jiu-jitsu move on me. I was asking him about him, and he said, sounds like you are. And I'm like, and I ran out of the office down to my normal stairs. But here's some things you could try. How do we fall open to our call? Stillness is a good idea. Morning watch was when it happened to me. Deep spiritual practice, although that's always a good idea. But don't time for stillness. Put the phone down. Turn off Netflix. Go for a walk. Still. And know that I am God. It's scriptural. Wonder. I think more than almost any of the other, a sense of wonder is what. Notice, it says in the text, Moses noticed and turned aside. I wonder why this bush is. I must go and see why this bush is burning, but not being consumed. Then God speaks. God didn't call from around the corner, Moses, get over here, check out this bush. God waits for Moses to notice with wonder and curiosity. I think wonder and curiosity are the mark of a great disciple. You want to look for your call? You want to hear it? You want to make sure you're noticed? Be filled with wonder about what the world is offering. Oh, leaves are falling right now as I speak. It makes me filled with wonder. Watch what's going on around you. I had a thought this week. We watch what's going on around us, but often we think there's only two responses, shock or laughter. Have you noticed that? The world of the internet has brought us to a place where they're either laughing at something we're seeing, or we're in shock and horror at how awful it is. Shock, horror, anger. Sometimes leading to paralysis or laughter. There's a whole bunch of stuff in the middle, my friends. Watch what's going on around you. Be mindful of the things that people do and why they do them. Watch with perspective, not just shock or laughter. There's in between. You ever have somebody say, "Can you believe what this has done?" And you go, "Yeah, I can believe that." And then what they wanted was shock and horror from you, and you're like, you had some perspective about it. I can understand why they act like that. People hate that. They hate it when you don't join them in their heavy laughter or your absolute shock. But there's a middle way, many middle ways. Finally, I have to say, listen, Linda, listen. Listen to, that's a YouTube joke, you'll find it. Just type in listen, Linda. Listen to others deeply. Be in conversation this autumn, in our coziness around the hearth, so to speak. If you don't have a fireplace, create a hearth for yourself, a table with autumnal colors, and a beautiful little tablecloth, and maybe a candle. Create a hearth that you can gather with friends and listen deeply to what they have to say, because God is often speaking through your kooky friends. God's call comes when someone offers a different perspective. God's call comes when you are listening deeply and you learn something new and you go, oh, maybe I was wrong.
I always could use a little more of that. Maybe I'm wrong. I had a great counselor once say, don't jump right to maybe you're wrong, Dave. That's too big of a leap for you. Maybe just say, maybe I'm not right in this moment. Just ease into it. Maybe I'm not right this time around. Listen deeply to who is speaking to you, because it just may be God. Autumn is a dreamy time, if you ask me. The leaves are falling beautiful. The colors are changing. We gather ourselves back into homes. We gather ourselves indoors and get cozy again. It's also a time for planting, and I've said this before, we seed in the spring. God is seeding right now. I'm watching it happen out that door. Poppies and other sunflowers are dropping their seeds. This is seed planting time in creation. And so autumn is a great time for us to nourish, to let the seeds be planted deep inside of us. And I thought this week, maybe God's call to us is a seed that we could take care of in this fall time. Maybe we can open our hearts, prepare them for seeds of calling to be planted anew. Maybe in this autumn time of dreaming and regathering and cozying up and getting ready to nourish and nurture our bodies through Thanksgiving suppers and through gathering with our friends and family. Maybe God's call is the seed that will come to us. May we be prepared to nurture and nourish that wonderful seed. May we be prepared to hear it anew. Amen.